Rob Vischer. Welcome to my storytelling podcast, God Out Loud. With every new episode, you'll hear thought-provoking stories of people who claim they heard God. Today, you'll hear from Niyonsenga, a guy who claims God warned him to stay away from his childhood home. If you want to hear more God Out Loud stories, follow God Out Loud on your favorite podcast app.
One of the cool things I loved about our old house, we had papaya trees, mango trees, avocado, banana trees. We used to climb those trees. I'm a food person, so anything that has to do with food, count me in, man. If I wanted an avocado, I'll just go and pick it. And we had mangoes. And so it was just like this very cool place.
This is one of my close friends, Niyonsenga, describing his childhood home. And the way he describes his home and his neighborhood make them sound like a little kid's paradise.
I had these 4 best friends I kind of grew up with. One of the cool things we used to all do together was trade eggs and chickens. And so they had a lot of roosters and I had a lot of hens. And so the agreement would be, hey, I'll bring my hens over to hang out with you roosters. If they have an eggs, you get X amount. And we had sort of this weird barring system. Saturday, I would walk to his house with my chicken in my arms and it was like, hey, we're gonna hang out. Our chickens are gonna hang out type of thing. We were like 8 or 9 and that's how we played. I mean, we didn't grow up with toys. We made our own toys. We made cars out of milk cartons. We would use pop tops to like make wheels and it was a different world, man.
When Tim talks about this different world, he gets a nostalgic, far off look in his eyes and a natural, unforced smile forms on his face. I've seen that same look take over my grandma when she's telling me stories of growing up in the Great Depression. It's a contagious longing for simpler times. Unfortunately for Tim, those simpler times ended without warning. This is Tim's mom, Virginia.
All of a sudden, we heard that the president's plane was crashed that night. And there was noise of gunshot, there was bombs, there was grenades, and there were people shouting and yelling. We didn't know what was happening because all of a sudden there was like fires everywhere. And when we looked through the window, we saw like fires everywhere. So there was a war. All of a sudden, everything was at a standstill and life had stopped.
Everything was at a standstill. Life had stopped. Let me walk you through a brief, probably overly simplistic summary of why life in simpler times had stopped for Tim and his family. Tim and his family lived in Rwanda in 1994. And in Rwanda, there are 2 major ethnic groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis. The Hutus hold an overwhelming majority, 85% of the population. The Tutsis are definitely the minority, but for many years, they ruled the country through a monarchy. In 1959, the Hutus overthrew the Tutsis, and many Tutsis fled to other surrounding countries. In 1990, a group of Tutsi exiles united to form an army called the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or the RPF. They invaded Rwanda until a peace deal was reached in 1993. Fast forward to the night of April 6, 1994. The president of Rwanda and the president of Burundi, 2 Hutus, were flying in the same plane. It was shot down, and everyone in the plane died. Hutu extremists blamed the Tutsi-led RPF, and they carried out a well-planned massacre of over 800,000 Tutsi citizens over the course of 100 days. During the genocide, they carried machetes, guns, and radios. Radios blaring hate messages like, "Weed out the cockroaches." Translation, kill the Tutsis.
They were burning houses, they were killing people, there were people shouting and screaming and yelling. It was the saddest day we have ever seen.
My mom's work, I had paid for a guard who would stay with us. And he came in, he was like, everybody get down. There are mobs of people that are going street by street, going through houses, and they're yelling, we're going to find Tutsis. We're going to kill them. All the Tutsis were part of this big plan. We're going to kill them. He said, everybody stay down. Don't come out. Don't make any noise because they are at our neighbor's house.
Our neighbor, next door neighbor, whose children were the same age as our children, we looked up and their house was on fire. And I saw like a mob of maybe over 50 people in their yard and around the house. And I thought for sure our house was next.
And so my mom told the guard, you get inside also so you can be safe because you're not going to fend off a mob. Just as he was coming in, we heard a knock. It was not a strong knock, but it was like a gentle knock. I insinuated it was sort of like a secretive knock. I remember the guard going to the door, opening it, and we heard this little voice that said, hey, can you let me in? Can you let me in? He opens the door, and it was my next door neighbor who we had been playing with a week before. And her name was Nadia. And she was with her sister. She came in. She was like, hey, there are people at our house. They just killed my mom. They're looking for my dad. Can you please let us in? Can you please let us in? Can you keep us safe?
And so the girls, the two girls jumped the fence. They jumped the fence and they came to my house.
And I remember my mom, without a question, just grabbing the two girls and hiding them under our bed where my brother was.
I had all the children under my bed. And there was also another girl that was our goddaughter. She was also Tutsi. She had spent the night.
Virginia was hiding under her bed with two neighbor girls, her goddaughter, and her three kids, Tim, Theo, and Grace.
So we have locked the doors. And our daughter Grace was 4, and she didn't understand, how to lay down or anything. So I laid on the top of her. Just if they kill me, maybe she won't get killed.
The guard closes the door. As it was closing it, he said, hey, I think your dad is right behind you. And the girls confirmed that. He said, yeah, he said he was going to be right behind us. He told us to run here. And he said he was right behind us. About 2 minutes later, as we were hiding under the beds, we heard this loud scream. This scream like a soul is being taken out of you. Just this terrible scream. I will never be able to get it out of my mind. I heard the mob shout, we got him, speaking in our language, meaning we got him. And remember laying on the floor, just shaking. And the girls were just couldn't cry, but we could tell they wanted to cry. After that, the screaming just suddenly got quiet for about 3 minutes. It seemed like eternity, but it got quiet. As quiet as it was, it suddenly got loud with rocks being thrown in our windows. People were trying to open our front doors, all the side doors, and they were screaming, we know those kids are there. Give us those kids. We know those kids are there. Give us those kids. We're going to kill all of you guys.
People got in our house, through the doors, through the window. They had guns, they have sticks, they have everything.
As soon as they got inside of our house, because it was dark, we could see flashlights where I was laying on the floor. You could see underneath the door, the crack of light and shadows moving back and forth and saying, we know you're in here.
When they were in the house, I knew I was ready. I was ready to die. And I just closed my eyes, waiting for a bullet or for a machete or for anything to hit me.
They went through every room in our house except for the one room where everyone was hiding. They're like, we don't know where you are. They ransacked the entire house, but for whatever reason, they did not open that door.
When they got in our family room, they saw our family picture that was in the room. And I heard, hey, don't kill anybody. This is Pastor John Gakwaya. It's our pastor. It's Pastor John Gakwaya. Don't kill anybody. And he is not here. He is overseas. He's in America. Don't kill anybody.
During that horrific night, Tim's dad, Pastor John Gakwaya, was at Kentucky Mountain Bible College in the United States. Pastor John had led a church of about 1,500 before heading to Kentucky Mountain Bible College to learn more. When the mob attacked, one man in the mob saw Tim's dad in the family pictures and realized it was his former pastor. Whoever he was, he convinced the mob to move on and not kill anyone.
I just remember them shouting, "Oh, this is Pastor John's house. This is Pastor John's house. Oh, we can't believe we're in here. This is Pastor John's house." So they shouted, they're like, "We know there's a man of God who lives here, but we're going to give you 24 hours. We'll give you 24 hours to give up those kids. If you don't give them those kids, there's no God that's going to protect you. We're going to come back for you. We're going to come back for you." So they were shouting, "Turagaruka, Turagaruka," meaning that we're going to come back. We're going to come back. So they left. As they were leaving, we hear this loud scream again, and they shouted, "This is what's going to happen to you if you don't give up those 2 kids. We know they're in there. We just can't find them."
It was like another 30 minutes before I could even open the eyes, because I didn't know if everybody had left the house. I didn't know if there was somebody standing on the top of me. I didn't know. When I opened the eyes, I looked. I still holding Grace. Grace did not cry. She was only 4. She didn't cry. She didn't make a noise. The kids, none of them screamed or anything. Our house was just a big mess of glasses and everything. They had cut electricity. They had cut all the phone connection. And so when I was able to open the door and looked outside, I saw a body, a bleeding body laying outside. They had cut off his head. That man was our next door neighbor, the father of those girls. I told the kids, don't even look through the window, stay in there. We stayed that night, but it was almost like staying outside.
Nobody actually really went to bed. We were just shaking, and they were shooting all over the house. And we stayed on the ground, and there were bullets all over our house. Morning came, our guard went outside and he looked, and the 2 girls' dad's body was in front of our yard. He had been decapitated and blood just flowing like a river down in front of our house. They left notes and saying, "We'll be back, we'll be back." It was after that night we realized that nobody was safe, that we wouldn't be safe.
Tim's mom decided to leave the house and take her kids, the 2 neighbor girls, and her goddaughter to another neighbor's house. The neighbor she asked to take them in was a personal friend who was kind of like the mayor of their area. He had a security team, food, and more than enough room for them to sleep. She thought they'd all be safe there, but even with the added protection, they were still ominously close to tragedy and death.
I just remember those 2 girls watching through the fence, watching as their dad's body just being, taken away. Because he had been there for a few days. Rain was falling on it and it was decomposing. And the guys who came to get it, I remember they took his clothes off, they took some of his shoes off, they tried them on. We're talking about a dead guy here. Some guy, I remember taking his jacket, looked through his wallet, and another guy just took his wallet. And to kind of give you the idea of how human life was being valued, or even just the human body. There was little value at that point. To me, it just made me realize people did not care.
Although the kids experienced unimaginable trauma by watching this grotesque scene play out, they still felt a sense of safety being behind the fence. But that sense of safety quickly disappeared.
I think it's been about a week. We were outside and trying to get some sun. We were playing, as kids, me and my brother and the 2 little girls. We were all hanging out, and we were outside just running around playing, and we hear a bunch of gunshots. And suddenly there's a tree behind me, and the barks of the trees just start flying off. And so we realized that somebody was shooting at us because the bullets just kept hitting the tree. We had been taught anytime you hear gunshots, you just drop on the floor. Everyone dropped. I felt like it was like a bad dream. I was trying to drop on the ground, but my knees wouldn't let me. I remember getting grazed by a couple bullets. Like literally, I'm standing and less than a foot away, this tree is getting hit. I'm like, "Dear Lord, help me. Help me just fall to the ground because I'm about to die." And suddenly, as quickly as those gunshots started, they suddenly just stopped. And it was at that moment we realized we are not safe here. And about a few hours later, we learned that there was a group of people had learned that we were at this mayor guy's house, and that we were on a list of people who were going to be killed. Somebody had called that house and said, "Hey, you guys need to get out. You guys need to leave," because somehow it had been discovered that we were at this house. I remember we packed things up. We hid in a different part of the house. And early in the morning, we decided to start walking, and we left like at dawn.
I dressed the kids with like 3 layers because I didn't know if we were going to come back. I didn't know if we were going to go forever. I didn't know anything.
Tim's mom left with him, his 2 siblings, the 2 neighbor girls, her goddaughter, and 3 other friends.
So we left and we were jumping over dead bodies. We saw so many dead bodies along the road. They would kill them in the house and take them out of the house and burn the house down and put the bodies over there. Those marshals that were killing people, I think they just had a fantasy of just knowing how many people they killed, but they were dead bodies along the road.
Yeah, we walked about like a day and a half, and so it's in the woods for part of that. Didn't eat much. It's amazing how when your life is being threatened, food is the last thing you think about.
And it wasn't just us. It was like 1,000 and 1,000 and 1,000 of people just walking and crying and starving. At some point, I found a minivan that was driving on the road, heading toward where my parents lived. The owner of the car knew me. He also was one of the high school principals that we used to go to a government meeting with the schools together. So he said, "Oh my, I can't believe you are here. You are just walking on the road." For some reason, that person said, "You can get in my van and I will take you wherever you want to go." And then he asked, "Who are those kids?" I said, "These are all my children, including those girls." I said, "These are all my children."
Virginia repeated that line at every checkpoint when a soldier or a militia member would pull their van aside. They would recognize her name because she was a well-respected headmaster of a high school. Then they would say, "Who are those kids?" And she would say,
"These are all my children."
We were in this little van that we were traveling. We were like hiding underneath the seats because we had been told, "Keep your heads down." We didn't want any like stray bullets hitting us. I remember like stopping and I hear her talk to these people. She's being asked like, "Who are these kids in here?" She's like, "These are my kids." I just remember my eyes like getting open. It's like, "Oh, Mom just told a lie." It's like, oh God, like, can you forgive her? I know these are not my siblings, but I knew it was like a big deal, like for her to claim them as part of our family because it was very risky. But anyway, I just remember like, oh no,
We got to a point in these mountains when they plant tea plantation. They were killing so many people. If they found it was a Tutsi, they would stop the cars and get people out, and then they would just shoot them or kill them with machetes.
None of the kids who were with Virginia died. Along the way, the 2 neighbor girls saw their aunt and uncle's house and found a safe place to stay with them. The others also found their way to a new version of home. Virginia, Tim, and the other 2 kids found their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. But even their extended family's village had not escaped the genocide.
And so when we got there, our parents didn't know even if we're still alive. And when we got in our villages, people were still killing each other. And it was horrible. It was horrible. But we were very happy to be reunited with our family.
Although tragedy could still be felt in that small village, Tim doesn't remember it. What he does remember is being with his family.
My uncles taught me so much just about like living out in the sort of the most rural part of the country, the parts where you look at National Geographic magazines, you see huts, you see cows, and that's where they lived. I mean, that's life, and they learned to kind of live that way. And me, the city boy during the war coming out, I had a lot to learn. And you thought the chicken trade was was good, but I had a lot to learn all about cows and goats and trading rabbits, trading whatever. It was a whole different level of things, man. And going out, being a shepherd with my uncles out in the fields and learning how to trap little animals and roasting them on fire. To me, those were things that like it was real life we had to, because we were quote unquote shepherds for a day or whatever. But it was also like they're teaching us how to do this like little life stuff. And the average 9-year-old can't do.
Tim learned a lot of new things during this forced visit with his family. But the person he remembers most is his grandfather.
My grandfather was a farmer, grew banana trees, grew crops. So I'm learning to take care of that with my hands a little bit. He would show us how things worked. He was very special to my heart. And during the war, like I said, he taught us so much just about little things. Very strong guy, man. Very strong guy. To tell you how strong he was crippled. He was crippled. He didn't have both his feet because he injured his one foot, but he could outrun anybody I knew. He was so fast. His leg was bent and he couldn't put both of his feet down, but he was so strong.
Tim cherished that time with his family. But because of the war, even that came to an end.
So then a few weeks later, that's when we had to leave that area and go to Congo.
So Virginia and her 3 little kids headed out slowly on foot to Congo, a country where they don't know anybody. Not only did Virginia not know anyone in Congo, her family represented only 4 people in a crowd of refugees that numbered in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands.
So when we got in Congo, all of a sudden we see a van. And whenever people are running around, they don't have nothing. When they see a car, they surround the car, begging. And I looked and I saw Glenn Snyder.
Glenn Snyder was a family friend who helped free Methodist pastors like Virginia's husband, Pastor John.
When I saw Glenn Snyder driving the van, honest to God, I saw him as a Jesus. Because we were in a different country where nobody knew us, where everything had crumbled down. And for sure I say, Glenn, it's me. Oh, wow. I said, Glenn, it's me. And he looked, he said, oh, Virginia. So he stopped the van. And I just, in my inner being, I knew somebody found me. I was lost. And I felt a big relief that at least somebody has found me.
Glenn was not only a family friend who had found Virginia and her 3 kids among thousands of Rwandan refugees in Congo. Glenn had a surprise for her. Ever since Virginia, Tim, Theo, and Grace had left their house, Virginia's husband, Pastor John Gakwaya, had been praying and fasting, asking God to bring them to him. And he claims after a lot of fasting and prayer, he had a dream and knew they were safe.
From April up to the end of May 94, I was not sleeping at all. I was waking up and wondering and what to do. But I remember when I slept, it was on 28th May of 94. I went, just lay down, and then I really slept completely. I saw my wife holding 3 kids, seeing Virginia and Timothy and Theophile and then Grace, seeing them together. They were telling me, oh, the war was, everybody fled away, and then it cut out. So they were telling me the story, how they ran away and everything. After that, I woke up. After dreaming this and seeing them, in my heart, I said, I will see them. There was a confirmation that since I saw them talking to each other, they would be here.
Because of that dream, Pastor John was so confident his family was alive that he told everyone on Kentucky Mountain Bible College's campus that his family was going to be safe. And he looked crazy. He even wrote a letter to his wife and gave it to Glenn Snyder in case Glenn saw her.
So Glenn say, hey, here, there's a letter that your husband wrote.
After some time getting documents together and securing a flight, Glenn's brother Steve Snyder took them to an airport in Congo, and he made sure they got on a chartered airplane that took them to safety. And when I say he made sure they got on the plane, I mean that literally.
They were stealing people. They were taking people back. And so Steve wanted to make sure that we got on the plane. Before we went on the plane, Even like the people at the customer service, they were still asking for bribe. They were asking for money. And Steve stood with them. He said they don't have money. They are refugees. But anyhow, at some point, like before we went in the plane, we said, we want to use the bathroom. There was no bathroom. There was just this little outside little hole that it's outside. It's outside. It's not inside. And he said, I don't want you to get out of my sight because they might snatch you. So he stood facing away, and then the kids went. So we used I used the bathroom. Steve was facing away, but just like a couple feet standing here so that we can use the bathroom. After we got done using the bathroom, he got us into the plane.
After Virginia's family safely entered the plane and the door shut, they promptly took off.
It was our first time to fly. We did not even remember to have the thrill of flying because we were running away for our lives.
When Virginia says they were running for their lives, she's not exaggerating. She found out later that they were one of the last flights to make it out before the airport in Congo was taken over.
I just don't even... Tim, do you remember anything about that flight? I just remember that the Creek parties had some chips. They gave us, it was the first time to eat chips, potato chips.
The only thing I remember is my brother needed to pee for like 8 hours. He couldn't.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I don't even know in matter of times how long it took from Congo to Kenya. All I knew, it was just like my mind was on the top of happiness. I had my children and we were going maybe in America at some point. So we went from homeless. We don't have food. Now they put us in a hotel where we ate 3 times a day, where we took showers, where we were not worried about anybody coming to kill us. It was the beginning of good times. It was almost like heaven.
In America, a stereotypical character of heaven usually looks like a life of leisure with a constant temperature of 75 to 80 degrees. Think Florida in the spring and fall or Orange County, California all year round. After escaping the hell of genocide, though, heaven looks like eating 3 times a day, taking showers, and not worrying about somebody coming to kill you. Virginia, Tim, Theo, and Grace made it to the States. They reunited with their dad and lived at Kentucky Mountain Bible College for a few years. Then their family eventually moved to Ohio, and Tim went to college with me at Spring Arbor University in Michigan, a Free Methodist school where Glenn Snyder's nieces also went. After Tim graduated Spring Arbor University with a bachelor's degree in social work, Tim and I became roommates. I remember a lot of funny stories about Tim. Once he accidentally stood a girl up for a date, and his laugh was so infectious and charming to the girl that when he called her to apologize, he only had to say one word, then laughed the rest of the time, and somehow she completely forgave him. I wish that worked for me. As single dudes, we ate a lot of pizza, did a lot of random stuff together, and watched a lot of movies. But I remember one movie he wouldn't watch, Hotel Rwanda, a movie about the Rwandan genocide. He said, I don't ever want to watch it. I lived it.
I used to experience a lot of nightmares, and it would take a long time to kind of get back to sleeping okay, and up until about like probably 5-6 years ago. And so for my own wellness, like I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it too much because I know how it impacts me internally. So being able to talk about it like this every so often is very helpful, but not in a way that's like I'm dwelling on it, if that makes sense.
Even though he still doesn't like dwelling on his escape from Rwanda, a few years after we graduated college, Tim started thinking about going back.
What led up to it was just sort of like realizing I'm at this transition point in my life. I'm not married. I just finished with school. I just realized this is something that I really wanted to do because just the way we left, because in my mind, I had always thought there's a chance we could go back, but it just never happened. A lot of our family was still there. My cousins that I grew up with, both of my grandparents on my mom's side, just uncles and aunts. I guess trying to kind of decide, is this sort of like a closure thing, or is this more of like a chapter of my life I can kind of reopen to see if there's an opportunity to continually go back and forth? At that time, I was seriously considering going into the military, like the rest of my siblings. I had taken the Air Force test, and I was just sort of like at this sort of like time in life where I was like, if I'm going to go, I better go now. And so as I was thinking about that, Glenn Snyder, who continues to be an important person in our family history, I was chatting with him because I knew that he was going to be going back to Rwanda because he often went back and forth a lot for medical missions. His father had started a hospital there years and years and years ago. Actually, that's where my mom had like a significant procedure in her life when she was pregnant with my sister. So this hospital is the cornerstone in this community. He was thinking about going back. So him and I kind of started talking about, well, can I go back with you at some point?
Glenn obviously said yes. So Tim started making a list of all the places he wanted to visit. And 2 places instantly topped that list.
The important place was going back to visit our old house where I grew up, because to me, that's a strong fixture in my head of this is where I grew up. And I loved our house. We had like papaya trees, mango trees, avocado, banana trees. I'm a food person, so anything that has to do with food, call me in. And we used to climb those trees. If we wanted an avocado, I'll just go and pick it. And we had mangoes. And so it was just like this very cool place. So that was one of the places I wanted to go back to. I wanted to obviously go visit my family. That was in Kibogora, Kyangugu. That's where my family is actually kind of originates from, which is about driving distance about 6, 7, 8 hours from the capital.
After Tim and Glenn planned the trip, the countdown began for Tim to return home. And as more time ticked off the clock, Tim became more and more anxious as some of his childhood memories started resurfacing.
Leading to it, I was very nervous going back because how we had left things. And it had been 18 years and there had been people accusing my family and other people about being part of the war somehow, or all these conspiracy theories that sort of kind of come out, and my mom's name coming up a couple of times and my dad's name coming up a couple of times. So there was like a lot of trepidation. I know I wanted to return, but as the time gets closer, I'm like, oh man, what if something happens? And so all these things are sort of kind of running to my mind, and I had a lot of anxiety leading up to it and prayed a lot. I actually met with Pastor Mark, I think once, just to kind of have peace about it. Because it always reminded me how my dad was praying when we were on our way here. And I just remember asking God, God, I need peace about this. If I don't have peace about it, I'm not going to go.
Tim wanted peace, but his anxiety continued to feel overwhelming. And he was seriously thinking about canceling the trip. A trip he had already spent thousands of dollars on.
I remember specifically it was a Sunday. It was like 2 Sundays before I was to leave. Pastor Mark preached on Psalms 23. He preached on it in a different way. It was like, even though I walk in the shadow of death, I would not fear evil, for you are with me. The way he talked about listening to God and God's protection, about sort of like how you need to also kind of dwell in prayer. I remember him talking through it and like going through this journey. And after that, I was ready to go. The funny thing is, as ready as I was still late getting to the airport, and Glenn was waiting for me. It was like, where you at?
After a few overseas stops, Glenn and Tim finally flew into Rwanda. And Tim was very nervous for the first few days. They landed in Rwanda on April 10th, almost 18 years to the day of when Tim and his family had to flee their home.
So it was just a weird timing. I hadn't really thought about it. Just like when I was buying the tickets, the agent who was helping Glenn and I get the tickets to it, the time he found for us to go. So we get to the airport. I'm already like feeling a little shaky, and it had been a long time since I had been amongst my own countrymen, hearing a bunch of people who are speaking Rwanda, not seeing a lot of white people around me, so we get to the gate and I get my passport and Glenn is with me. Glenn is like, hey, just, if they start asking you questions, you let them know that we're on a medical mission thing together. The least amount of talking you can do, the better. I was like, okay. So we walk through the gate and he hands the guard the passport and he looks at him, checks it. The guy grabs my passport, looks at me, looks at the passport, looks at me and starts asking me questions. It's like, oh, you're an American citizen, but you have a Rwandan name. I'm like, yeah, I am. And it's like, well, tell me about that. I was like, well, I grew up here, but now I'm an American citizen. And so Glenn quickly kind of jumps in. He's like, yeah, he's my brother. He's coming with me where he's going to help me translate. I'm a doctor, so yeah, he's going to be working on some cases. So he's with us and he's going to be doing good work here. And the guy just stamped my passport and I go. I did not sleep that first night because everything was just so surreal. And it was the weirdest thing because I started having this flashback. It was almost like I had never left. Like it was just suddenly all those 18 years of my life were it's all almost compressed into 1 year almost. But I was now much bigger, a 10-year-old boy to a 26-year-old man, but I'm here now. And I just remember trying to sleep, and I specifically asked Glenn that I did not want to sleep downstairs. I wanted to sleep upstairs. Just strategic, thinking okay, if somebody should come in, I don't want to be the first one to be cut or anything like that. If anything, I just remember even hearing a tire pop that night, thinking, oh, the war is gonna start again. It was just a tire popping, It was just I just remember having so much anxiety. It was my mind kind of switched. I was sort of kind of back trying to survive.
It wasn't until Tim and Glenn left the city and drove to Ogara Hospital that Tim started to feel more comfortable.
We had to hire a chauffeur on our way. We see the beautiful countryside and, you get to see how the city has transformed. It's very westernized now, but the more we drove, it's oh yeah, this is the old life where you see people carrying things on their heads, carrying water on top of their heads. They don't have indoor plumbing. There are goats and a lot of banana trees, farms, and a lot of green tea, coffee trees. We were going through the forest and you see a lot of monkeys, which was really cool. As a kid, when I would go visit my parents, it kind of seemed we're always in a hurry and we couldn't stop because it was we're going in a taxi. But this time when I was with Glenn, it was just 3 of us. So we're driving and I just remember as we're driving, I had always wanted to stop. And it's called Niyonsenga. It's one of the biggest national forests there. I had always wanted to stop and just see everything. And it's I didn't even have to ask Glenn. It's almost Glenn knew. He was hey, Tim, do you just want to stop and take it in a little bit? And I almost cried. And I remember, I don't know how he knew this. He knew to take a little bit of peanuts and he left her on the side of the road. Monkeys just came from nowhere. And they came and it was the coolest thing and very peaceful, quiet. You could turn off the car and never hear a sound of a man-made noise. It was just all nature.
Even though life in Rwanda had settled down and become peaceful since 1994, while Tim was at Ogara Hospital, he discovered some of the lingering effects of the Rwandan genocide.
I did help do a little bit of translating work. I got a chance to talk with some other doctors, and they're trying to develop mental health clinics there. It's just so sad because it had been 18 years. There were still people coming into the clinics to be treated for depression, to be treated for the loss they've had, people who have had families who are wiped out and coming to seek mental health services because of the trauma. My background is a social worker, and so it's just I understood a lot of the challenges they were facing, and so It was very sad because my siblings and I, to some degree, we've all have needed to kind of deal with it differently. But we know people who have suffered way more emotionally because of this experience. But just to see, even like 18 years later, people who can't talk because of the harm that has been done to them, they become mute because of inability to express their trauma.
The mass killings in Rwanda left a lot of mental trauma in their wake. But Tim also saw physical scars.
One of the ladies at that clinic, she was missing a limb. They had cut her with a machete. It was like a sharp thing from between her shoulder and her elbow. You could tell they just chopped it off. And she had a bunch of holes in her other side of arm, and she was coming to get help. It's prevalent to see people walking around with missing legs, a lot of like facial scars. If other physical evidences were removed, if buildings were completely rebuilt and made new, the amount of like actual physical scars were just out of character for people in a certain community to have.
After seeing a lot of pain, Tim got to see his family. The extended family who 18 years earlier had given him and his mom shelter after escaping the genocide.
I got a chance to see my grandparents. I mean, that was one of my things I wanted to do, to go there and see them, because my siblings and I, my mom, we had lived with her before we went to the Congo. One of my favorite parts and things that made me wanting to go visit, just like knowing how much life experiences I picked up from there. I mean, there's a lot of memories tied to that place, and it was important for me to like reconnect with my family. When I got to see my grandpa, it's like he knew that I probably would never see him again. And I remember when I was walking out, he had a little bit of land, and it was he stopped and gathered the whole family. And he said, my son, I probably won't see you again. But if you should ever return to this land, you see this part that I own. If you ever come back and you want a place to build a house, and your uncles are here as witnesses, and the rest of my family's here as witnesses, this part will be yours. They now know because I have spoken it. It's just,
After experiencing the joys and the sadness of coming back to his homeland, Tim was ready to make one final stop at his childhood home.
Gwen and I are preparing to kind of start winding our trip down. So we drive back to the capital. And one of my final things on the bucket to do was to revisit my childhood home and places I used to kind of play. And through this whole trip, my anxiety had really significantly subsided. I had been fine, but I was back in Kigali. My anxiety started ramping up. And I was like, God, I just need your peace right now. And I just remember starting feeling more anxious again. I just remember not feeling comfortable as I had been the last week and a half or so. And I just remember also like, once again, kind of recalling like my dad's story, like how he prayed and just asking for specific things to God. It's like, hey, like, Lord, if this is your will, God, like, I'm going to go to bed. I'm supposed to go there tomorrow. Like, I don't know why I'm feeling uneasy. Just help me out. Like, let me dream or something. Like, and I remember going to bed, and I had this dream about going to visit. And as I'm walking to the place, I specifically remember a lady coming to me, like she's trying to sort of block me from going to my house. She's telling me, is like, hey, don't go there, but like it's just not clear why. It's just like it's like a dream. It's not clear, but it's just like basically trying to prevent me from going. And it was just like the weirdest thing. And like, but it was so real. It felt like it was actually happening.
So after asking God for a dream, Tim gets a dream warning him not to go to his house. But Tim wakes up, gets ready for the day, and shakes the dream off, thinking it's probably just a product of his increased anxiety.
I'm getting ready, and somebody's supposed to come and get me, to kind of help me navigate sort of like the area, because there's a lot of like landmarks that kind of changed. And as I am getting ready, one of my mom's old friends, her name's Aquita, she came and she was like, "Oh, Tim," we greet each other and everything. And she's hugging me. One of my mom's friends had told her that I was in town. And Aquita asked me what I was doing. And I was like, "Hey, I'm going to go see the house where we used to live." She's like, No. She's like, "I just came from the market and there were people there. They found a lot of bodies in front of your house." I was like, "What?" They're digging them out right now. It would not be good for you to show up. And so these were bodies that were buried from 18 years before during the war.
Tim almost ignored the dream because the pull of wanting to see his childhood house one last time was so strong. But the news from Aquita made his decision easy.
All these bodies were found right where we used to live, in front of our house. And the one time after 18 years, I show up, and it's like, "Oh yeah, this is the son of the people who used to live here." And suddenly kind of finding myself in a situation being held ransom or being made to stay in order to serve as some sort of leverage to a bigger situation that I don't want to be a part of. I just remember like, "Oh, this is it." I'm not going.
Like I said, it was an easy decision for Tim because it confirmed two things. It confirmed that the dream was true, and it confirmed the childhood house he remembers growing up in. A house where he picked avocados and mangoes. A house where he traded chickens with 4 of his best friends. That house was still the house where he had to hide under the bed to escape bullets and machetes. That house was still the house where Nadia's father was beheaded in the front yard. Just like the rest of Rwanda, that house still had scars.
At this point, I'm just ready to go home. So I'm riding to the airport and I get a call. And one of the girls we had saved, my mom had hid. She calls me. She was like, "Hey, I just want to say thank you so much. I heard you were in town. I've been trying to get a car to come and see you. How much longer are you gonna be there? I just want to come and give you a hug." But I was like, I'm actually getting ready to board a plane to go. But we sit there. She just shares her life with me, just about the kids she has now and how they're growing up. And she's talking about, "This is what your mom did for my life." And I hear the little voices and I talk to them, and she tells me just about a little bit about her journey after they were dropped off. And she's like, "Me and my sister are the only ones left in our family. We had 6 or 7 siblings. Like, we're the only ones left. And if it hadn't been for your family's kindness, our whole family would be wiped out. There wouldn't be any Musonere's kids. We would be gone."
If Tim would have visited his childhood house, there's no guarantee he would have been held for ransom or even questioned by the police. No one knows what would have happened. But here's what I do know. The most vivid memories Tim holds from his last trip to Rwanda are not the disappointing memories of a childhood house with workers digging for dead bodies in the front yard. For Tim, the most vivid memories of Rwanda are memories of people. People who helped Tim's mom and people who Tim's mom helped. Graveyards hold monuments to past lives or accomplishments. But that's not what Tim's mom left in Rwanda. She left behind a garden, not just a garden of papaya, mango, and avocado trees, but a garden where she cultivated people. And that garden keeps growing. Because of her, Tim can go back anytime and know that regardless of whether his childhood house is still there or not, he always has a childhood home. Thanks for listening. If you like this story, hit follow or subscribe now. Also, you can help me tell more stories by going to godoutloud.com and funding more stories like this one. And if you have a true story you want to share with me, go to godoutloud.com and say, Robbie V, I have a legit story. The theme song is written by me and produced by the Joe of all trades, Joe Fry. Thanks to Tim Niyonsenga, Virginia, Pastor John Gakwaya, and Glenn Snyder. Thanks again, y'all, for listening to God Out Loud. I hope these stories inspire you. Help me tell more stories of people who claim they heard God by going to godoutloud.com now and funding more God Out Loud stories. Because I'm not an email in your spam folder, I can't promise you that I'm a foreign prince who wants to share my inheritance of $332,467,112.37. But I can promise all the profit I make will go towards the Create More Stories Fund and the Feed My Family Fund. Thank you for your generosity. Still the funniest memory I have of you. I won't put this on the podcast, but the funniest memory I have of you is there was a girl that you were going to go out on a date with.
Uh-huh.
and,
Oh, no.
And you had accidentally forgotten about the date. and she either called you up or you called her.
No, this is...
And I remember you literally laughed your way through the whole phone call, said like one or two words, and then I remember hearing you say, okay, bye. And I was like, how do you get out of that? I wish I had that kind of disposition where people just let me off the hook.
Oh.
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do. I do. Oh my gosh.